Good evening, everyone. This is Omkar here. I am going to be spending probably the next 30 to 40 minutes talking to you about how you can drive incremental revenue by leveraging cloud technologies. The focus is, of course, going to be around how licensing and cloud licensing or connected licensing is going to enable this journey and enable these technologies. Let's start talking about the presentation, and let's go through some of the key concepts. And if you have questions, like Dominic says, feel free to go ahead and start putting them down on the chat screen, and I'd be happy to address them at the end of the conversation. So let's take a step back to understand what's essentially driving innovation, or what's driving the evolution of new licensing technologies, new cloud technologies driving incremental revenue, and so on. The fundamental driver is the changing buyer landscape. If you look at how your customers bought your applications and your software 5, maybe even 10 years ago, it was very different from how they do today. Let's take some key differences over the last 10 years and what has changed. The audience, or essentially your customers. Few years ago, when you targeted a new prospect, a new customer, you would focus on talking about the organization, talking about what your product or application does, and so on. In what is called as today's sharing economy, your audience already understands what you do and what products you bring to the market, what's the key value proposition. 60% of the research about your company has already been done, and your audience already knows about this company. So what this essentially means is they have a high product familiarity when you go in for the first meeting, when your sales teams go in for the first meetings. It's no more spending 10 minutes or 10 slides walking through the company. It's about understanding your customer's pain point, and right from the word go, addressing or aligning your solutions to that. And because this product familiarity is so high, once again, because of the sharing economy, people are reading up about the various solutions they need in the market. They're reading up, talking to their peers on forums, trying to see which is the best CRM solution, which is the best ERP solution, and so on. The brand perception as a result of that is pretty intense, in the sense that the moment you start engaging with your customers, their expectation out of your solution, your application is very high. Simply because they have done a pre-research, they have validated what you do, they expect that the moment you start interacting, they can start getting value out of the discussions. They expect instant gratification out of the whole engagement, right? And all these lead to how, in turn, the buying process is changing. Today, 95% of all opportunities or leads originate from the web. So if I'm looking for a new collaboration software, I'm going to go to Google, type collaboration software, and immediately I'm going to get a bunch of advertisements, and then I start reading about each of them. Then I pick 2 to 3 which seem relevant based on that marketing message and the brand that relates most to me, and then I go ahead and reach out on the website of the customers of the application company, saying, hey, I'm interested in knowing more. And there's been some research done by IDC and Gartner and some of the other analyst firms which say that up to 55% of the buying process is already complete before even the first meeting. Very, very powerful and very interesting statistics. And I'm going to tie this to how in turn there's a shift in what the buyer, who is controlling the buying process, and so on. 10 years ago, like I talked about, the seller was in control. The sales team would go proactively reach out to customers, talk about the value proposition of their products, and about 60% of the whole information sharing process was controlled by the sales teams. Now today, clearly the buyer is in control. So they have already researched your company. They have already researched the product. They understand that one of 3 products in the market today is going to be the one that they are going to finally procure and start using. So as a result, the control has shifted away from the software publisher and gone into the buyer's hand. That said, this shift in control has given rise to a very interesting phenomenon. Let me give you an example with SafeNet ourselves. So some time ago, as a part of the business development team, I do a lot of training for my sales organization. I work very closely with product management and so on. So I needed a web solution which would help me collaborate across cross-functional teams. And I researched few WebEx, GoToMeeting, and a couple of other solutions in the market. GoToMeeting seemed very interesting because they gave me a lot of features at the price point that I was comfortable with. They gave me a free trial. I tried it out. It worked well. I did several calls. They limited it to 3 people, 4 people. And at the end of the day, I went and recommended to my management team, hey, we should consider GoToMeeting as a possible solution. And similarly, a couple of my colleagues did the same, and then this kind of bubbled up, and then the CIO started talking to GoToMeeting. What I'm trying to bring out here is a very interesting shift. 5 years ago, the sales rep would go to the CIO, talk to them, and say, hey, we have this product, and then the CIO would release an RFP, and then there would be a bake-off and so on. Today, the business user, they have played with the product themselves, then they give the recommendation to the CIO. So the rise of the individual buyer is a significant change, meaning now you're not marketing to the CIOs or you're not marketing to just the technology folks, you're marketing to the actual end user who is going to be using your software. And this sort of shift has consciously or subconsciously impacted the way most software companies today go to market. And when I say software companies, this is relevant across segments, be it customers whose software is primarily run on-premise, be it SaaS companies, or even if it is device plus software companies. So this change has redefined how they go to market, and it's taken multiple very interesting phases through the process. Most companies today, I would say almost 90%, and I talk to a lot of product managers, have what's a freemium or a free trial to initially bait or hook or the end users. These freemium models essentially would mean you either give a limited functionality of your product for the end users to use and then get familiar, start working so that as their needs go up, as they want to scale up more, they start buying more. That's one way of looking at the freemium model. The other way companies try to get their end users to try their product is the free trial, where they give all the functionality for a limited period of time. And then the end users can test it, play with it, and then decide what they like. This sort of brings about a very different stakeholder in the whole process. Initially, at the freemium free trial market, freemium free trial mode or phase, marketing plays a really significant and huge role in how this is adopted by end users. And then there is the operations piece to enable and get the software or application in the hands of end users and get the feedback on how they're trying. Once this step is done, the second step is basic. Again, going back to the GoToMeeting example, and we are running this webinar through GoToMeeting. Their free trial has about 3 users coming on to a session, and then they can use GoToMeeting. The basic version has 8 users, 12 users, or so on, and then they give some additional capabilities such as even sharing of screens, sharing of videos, and so on. Then you kind of go to the next level, which is advanced. At the advanced level, you start focusing on 100 plus employees, 200 plus employees, additional features like storage, and so on. And then you go to bundles and enterprise. And realistically, when you look at this whole evolution, the sales team starts engaging probably from the advanced bundles and at the enterprise level. It's usually from the software publisher or from the software makers team stakeholders. At the premium and the basic, it's primarily marketing and operations. Advanced, you have inside sales, and then bundles and enterprise, you have the external sales team. On the buyer side, typically the freemium and basic are the business users. At the basic level, they just swipe a card and then they use the application. Once you start going to advanced bundles, you start getting more stakeholders such as the CIO's organization, procurement, operations, finance, and so on. So this redefined go-to-market in turn is impacting how you go ahead and change and package your software. And that's probably one of the most critical pieces of how you're going to drive value to your product in the market today. Most companies, again, if you see the graph on the left, most companies today have a similar go-to-market packaging structure, like the ones we spoke about. They have a premium package, probably a standard, advanced, and then finally an enterprise. And I talk to, like I said, I talk to a lot of product managers. What most companies struggle with are 2 significant pieces. One, they have the ability, they kind of struggle with the ability to move their customers seamlessly between these packages. It usually takes manual steps to move somebody from a standard package to an advanced, and then from an advanced to the enterprise package. And because it's a manual step, there are about 3 to 4 ramifications as a result of it. One, there is a significant time lag, and I've had conversations where it takes about 2 to 3 weeks, where it takes people to move their customers between packages. And because of going back to that initial slide where I talked about brand perception and the need for instant gratification, customer satisfaction starts getting affected because they're like, I have paid for these packages, why am I not getting it? The 2-week lag. The second piece, till the package is available to the customer, you cannot recognize the revenue. So the cycle time becomes critical from a revenue piece. The third and most probably important is the resources. Typically, it takes 2 to 3 resources in the back end working to move customers between these packages, which is good resources that can be used for engineering and other value-added pieces if there are automated solutions to do this. The second very interesting concept here is, again, most companies, and this I would say even 95% plus, struggle, especially on the B2B kind of company struggle, where if a customer is on a standard package, they do not have the ability to consume maybe 1 or 2 critical features on the advanced package, which is probably relevant to them. And this essentially means customers are leaving, or software publishers are leaving consumer surplus, leaving money on the table. Let me give you an example of how that works. In the United States, we have a fast food chain called Subway, and I'm sure you have similar chains in the geographies you are at. Typically, a sandwich costs $5, and then chips and drinks an additional $2. If as a customer, if my lunch budget is $7, and these fast food chains had just like $5 sandwiches, I would go into a sandwich place because my lunch budget is $7. I would buy a $5 sandwich. There is nothing else that typically I can buy. I'm going to walk out. However, they realized this, that my budget as leaving that $2 I could have spent. They brought out drinks. They brought out these combos and chips. So now I go in, buy a sandwich, get chips, get a drink, pay $7. My complete budget is I spend on the sandwich shop and I come out, which means essentially that the consumer surplus is zero in this case. And this concept, while it's very well defined and mature in retail and probably even in the gaming industry, is not as prevalent in the B2B software world, or even in some cases the B2C software world, simply because most companies struggle at a level to be able to offer these models to drive incremental revenue. Let me digress for a moment here and talk about gaming. The other day I was playing a game. It was a car racing game, and they gave the ability to buy better tires for like 25 cents. And I was competing with a group of my friends, and I was like, hey, why not? 25 cents, I get a better shot at bragging rights to come first. And what's so interesting is the way they've generated this incremental revenue out of marginally very, very low cost to deliver, right? They had the infrastructure in place. They had the solution in place. They just gave me the opportunity to spend some more. So if from a software perspective, constantly product managers look for additional ways to generate revenue, this is a great thought to have and to look at their product portfolio. Taking another example, Microsoft Excel. If they had pivot table, if they reduce the price of their Office package and then gave the ability to buy additional pieces through individual pricing, I think fairly certain that they can capture a lot of incremental revenue here. And as we start looking at the go-to-market piece, what really is important is as you start taking different packages to market, looking at different ways to get that incremental revenue, it is extremely important that the pricing models that you go to market with are aligned clearly and completely with the packages you have. Historically, most companies, they went with what is called the perpetual pricing model. Most software companies, the sales rep would go sell $1 million deal, and then he'd be like, okay, I'm good, I'm gone. And then after 3 years, he would come back for a maintenance package, right? You really did not understand several things, how the customer was using the application, did they use all the features, and so on. To sort of get that engagement going and to get that predictability in revenue, over the last few years, maybe 3 to 4 years, it's been the rise of the subscription economy. Essentially, you sell an application, and then instead of charging a one-time upfront fee on an annualized basis, you charge them a subscription fee. Again, a very powerful solution, brought a whole lot of benefits. And in the US, Wall Street loves companies which do that because it gives a very predictable view of the revenue. If you know the churn rate, then you can very clearly understand what the revenue is. It also decreases the barriers for customers to come and try your application. And as the subscription economy and this annualized approach started getting more popular, newer challenges started arising. For example, let me give an example again from a SafeNet perspective. We are Salesforce.com users here within SafeNet. And I use Salesforce.com, and honestly, I run the report once a week just before my meeting with my general manager. However, the sales rep, they literally use Salesforce, I mean, a countless number of times on a daily basis. But Salesforce charges the same amount for me and for the sales rep, which sort of, I would step back and say, hey, I'm using far lesser than them. So in comes the newer pricing models today, which are gaining a lot of popularity, which is consumption-based models, wherein Salesforce can still charge a flat subscription fee, and then for users who use a lot or very little, they can charge a consumption-based model to make sure that there is nobody is going to churn and nobody is going to leave because of a high price. Ideally, when I talk to customers today, it's seldom that customers have one pricing model that they go to market with. It's usually a combination of more than one, and that's where the beauty of the overlap comes in, right? If you look at the Venn diagrams here, a lot of companies today, what they do, and our own customers, we have examples where they charge their customers on a subscription fee and on a monthly or an annualized basis, and then they say, hey, for additional resources or a burst to the cloud or for additional data bandwidth, we are going to charge you at a fixed fee at X dollars or X euros per gig of data that goes through our system, or X gig for extra computing power. So this is like fantastic, because now they have the predictability on the revenue. They also have the platform and the ability to go after that incremental revenue, and thus they are able to maximize their profits on their top line with the marginal costs to doing that being very low. There are different ways, and based on your unique business model, you can choose what's the right pricing mix that is relevant to you. There are situations like people using perpetual plus consumption based. That's what we call the razor blade model, where initially you spend X number of dollars for the core razor, and then each cartridge additional is on consumption basis. Perpetual plus subscription, you buy a platform initially for X dollars or euros, and then you pay a monthly subscription fee to get probably a data stream or a data service on top of that. So based on the right business model and based on the packages that you are going to market with, choosing the pricing model that is relevant becomes absolutely key. Which kind of comes to the next piece and kind of starting to get to the core of the discussion today, right? How does cloud enable this, and what are the different ways that you can build a seamless architecture within your landscape to drive this capture of incremental revenue and the whole transformation around business models? Some of the key building blocks or critical components here was definitely you need a CRM solution which sort of tracks which customer has bought what and so on. Ideally, if you're going with a subscription billing model, a subscription pricing model, a consumption-based pricing model, having a billing solution in place becomes a critical component, because you need to generate the invoices more on a recurring basis and less of a one-time basis. And then the third piece, which is the e-commerce piece, becomes critical. You want your customers to be engaged with you. You want them to come on to a web portal to download the free trials, to buy the basic version themselves, have that e-store where they can get additional features at the swipe of a card. Finally, maybe even have the ability to drive in-application purchases through promotions and notification. And on the far left, you have the importance of having marketing automation in place to enable this whole piece, which is if there's a promotion going on, you send out an in-app notification saying, hey, for the next 2 months, we are going to give you these 3 features free of cost. Go ahead and use it. After 3 months, if you still like it, you want to use it, you can pay probably X dollars to get it. And simultaneously, through email marketing and so on, you keep reaching out and engaging with your customer to get them to use your application and software a little more. The glue which kind of ties it and is important is at the center is the software monetization or the licensing piece. So think about it. The licensing piece is going to in turn it's going to talk to the CRM solution to give them information on which customer bought how much and what are they entitled to. The licensing piece is going to take this, the usage, the true application usage information, feed it to a billing system, and then they can invoice on consumption-based business models. Once you come to an e-store or an in-app, or you get an in-app purchase notification, then your entitlements or your customers would be entitled to the right level based on what they have purchased, and so on. And this information the usage information can then feed into reports, and marketing automation can then work on building promotions for specific customers. And I'll talk about what we can do with usage information in a moment. So this sort of gives you a holistic view on what the ecosystem on the back end that's required to drive this incremental revenue. Let's deep dive into the licensing piece and talk about how licensing has evolved not only to enable this architecture and enable this building blocks, but also in turn empower software companies to innovate on different go-to-markets. And one of the major trends that's driving software monetization or licensing innovation is the end user expectations, or what the end user is in turn asking from the software publishers. And we are in the millennial generation. A lot of them have grown up on the cloud. A lot of them have grown up used to the AWS way of pricing, the AWS way of doing things. So essentially it boils down to pay-per-use model. Almost all software companies, and recently we did a research wherein about 75% of software publishers today either have a consumption-based business model or pricing model that they go with to the market today, or they have that in the roadmap within the next 1 year. And that's simply because end users are asking for it. I want to pay for what I use. And if you go today to AWS, Amazon Web Services, and buy infrastructure from them, they charge you for the number of hours of CPU usage, they charge you for a number of hours of database usage, and so on. So this sort of mindset is now moving up from the infrastructure layer into the application layer. The second piece that the end user is asking from a licensing perspective is they want to license users, not machines. Today, with the complete proliferation of mobile devices, the end users are seamlessly moving between their Android, iPad devices to their laptops, to their desktops, and they want to have their licenses move along with them. They don't want to reinstall a license in each individual device. Case in point are engineers who use applications from Adobe, Autodesk, and so on, who start their design process on a laptop and probably finish off at a desktop at home, and then on the way to commute, they're working on their iPads and Android mobile devices trying to fine-tune it. So this is a clear requirement that we keep hearing from the market. Third piece, the real-time interaction, kind of goes back to that initial piece about the way the buyers engage with software publishers today, that need for instant gratification. They want to buy your application, they want it activated today, they want to upgrade, get new features, they want the new features immediately. So the patience to wait for shipping of hardware keys and so on, in several cases is not as high as it was a few years ago. The final piece, and again very important, is there is no license keys to manage, and that's fairly critical because at the end of the day, a lot of end users are in locations very different from where their core procurement sits, core IT sits. So shipping hardware keys not only delays the process at times, introduces some operational inefficiencies, which can be avoided, in my humble opinion. So they do not want license keys to manage. They don't want 16-digit codes. They just want instant licenses, and they want their software to be activated immediately. Let's spend maybe a minute or two on how the software publishers, how like the audience today in the webinar today are thinking about it. They are looking at cloud licensing, connected licensing, new licensing models to enable them to roll out new business models, not just perpetual one-time licensing, but subscription-based, consumption-based, time-based, quantity-based, so on. They just want the ability to have multiple models so as to drive and go after new markets, niche markets, low price point markets, and so on. With the advent and the maturity of virtualized environments, most companies today want licensing solutions that work in a virtualized environment. They don't want the experience to get spoiled for customers when they move from a virtualized infrastructure to another, where the licensing solution is not able to seamlessly do that. Or they do not want to leave money on the table where the application is now run on multiple virtualized, one copy of the application is running on multiple virtualized environments. Of course, with the connected licensing, where the licensing solution is on the cloud, there's lesser dependency on IT, thus freeing up key resources to focus on important and more organization strategic projects. The other very important piece, and which I particularly am very passionate about, is the importance and relevance of usage data. And this is a really big differentiator that today's licensing solutions or cloud licensing solutions have, where you get real-time access to true application usage, which customer is using which feature, how much, and so on. This kind of spawns off two critical threads, and I'll talk about it in a bit. One being the ability to drive consumption-based business models. You can track bandwidth, data, and so on. And the other, getting real-time actionable intelligence on where you need to make your next big product investment based on how your end users are using your application. And of course, having a centralized management piece across, if you have a SaaS service, if you have an on-premise application, having the single version of truth from one place is a big benefit. Let's look at how connected licensing or cloud licensing enable these drivers. Data-driven, it's very important in today's world that your decisions are made based on analytics and key information on true application usage. And cloud licensing can enable that. We talked about how user-centric being a key driver because of what the end user is asking for. I'll talk a little bit more about how that impacts the licensing piece. And finally, the need for real-time interaction and the need for immediate, actionable impact to the end customer, right? Let's talk about each of it in turn, and let's focus first on the data-driven piece. What does that mean to you, right? It definitely helps you make smarter investment decisions, and in a moment I'll tell you how. If you look at this slide here, you're selling your application to the end user, and different customers are at different price points. And if you had the ability to aggregate true application usage across these customers, you can get some pretty interesting and impactful insights from that. Take, for example, this particular customer here. At a very low price point, probably one of your early customers, maybe one of the ones who initially started buying your products at a low price point, he's getting a ton of value. And how do I define value? Value at the end of the day is directly correlated to how extensively your application is being used. So when it comes to contract renewal time, you can go up to this customer and actually renew the contract in a manner that he pays a higher price because you know he's getting a ton of value from your application. On the other end, you have a customer who has paid a very high price but probably is not using your application as much. What do you think? This customer is most likely to churn, or you're going to lose him as a customer in a year's time. So maybe it's time to have sales talk to him, find out whether he's having challenges, find out if they're having challenges implementing the product, find out if she needs some training on what are the different features. Ideally, you want your customers to migrate to this fair balance between the price they pay and the value they get. So having this true application usage gives you this insight from a customer, driving the customer expectation and satisfaction perspective. The second piece that this insight can be used for is you can get some critical information around which feature is being used. Probably you think that the formulas part of your application is being used more. It may turn out that the collaboration part of it is being used a lot more. Now you can realign your investments to make sure you enhance those features and get customers give them more innovative ways in your product. So it's a very powerful piece. The third and final piece, you have all this usage information, and cloud licensing from SafeNet can track bandwidth, volumes, number of time a feature was used, what is the computing that was utilized, and so on. And then you can build consumption-based business models out of that, making it a very, very powerful go-to-market story for you. All in all, what the usage can do is fantastic from a go-to-market perspective. Take this usage information, putting into a billing system. Now you have an automated solution there which can enable you to drive this whole subscription and consumption-based pricing models. Real time, right? What does this mean? At the core of the issue from a real-time perspective is the increased customer satisfaction. The moment that they buy your application, it gets activated. No more waiting for a shipment of hardware keys to come. No more waiting for a 16-digit code that corporate has sent, and then you need to enter it, and you need to wait for procurement to send it to you. Emails get lost, and so on. So it's instantly your application is activated at the end user site, and that's pretty powerful from a satisfaction perspective. You have full control of your licenses. If tomorrow the customer stops paying, you can just turn off the licenses and encourage them to start making their payments once again and ensure that you actually are getting paid for what your customer is using. Finally, there are costs associated with shipping hardware keys and timelines. So those go away in the cloud environment where everything is cloud-based and there's no resources spent, both manual as well as monetary, to drive the shipments and so on of hardware keys. Let's talk about the final piece, which is user-centric. I already spoke about how the end-user expectation is having no license keys to manage, having licenses that move seamlessly between devices. This not only improves the customer experience, but it also gives them confidence in when you tie the license to a user, so they can run your application in a virtualized environment without a drop in the user experience. At the same time, usage information is tracked, and then you can charge back the customer with confidence, knowing that there is no money being left on the table. So very, very powerful, again, in terms of, from a business perspective, the benefits of making licensing user-centric. So let's talk a little bit about Sentinel Cloud. I'll maybe spend a couple of minutes on our solution, walk you through some case studies, and then we'll have last 10 minutes or so for questions that you may have. So Sentinel Cloud is our connected cloud licensing solution, and cloud-connected licensing solution. It's what we call a feature-based user provisioning and authorization solution. It essentially has two parts. The backend, which serves as the entitlement management system and which serves as the brain behind running the whole licensing story within an ISV. And then you have what's called as the enforcement piece, which essentially ensures that the end customer gets what he's entitled to, is able to use what he is paid for. So, and the secret sauce through that is we are able to track true application usage and are able to push this information back to the EMS and in turn back into probably a billing solution at your end or a reporting solution. We provide analytics so you can get a good sense of what the solution does. And what's really interesting through this whole thing is this whole solution is cloud-based. So it addresses some of the key points such as the real-time connectivity, the need for instant activations, the need for true application usage, no IT, not very low IT footprint from a license server installation and so on. Absolute control over the licenses. So very powerful differentiators here. And the way we are architected, like I said, there are probably three different blocks to Sentinel Cloud. One is what you see on the left-hand side is EMS or entitlement management system. Serves as the brain behind the whole piece, where the ERP system sends the order in, its provision, a contract, an entitlement is created, which in turn sends to SCC, which is our license server on the cloud, and which is what we call our secret sauce that serves as the mechanism by which the usage is tracked, enforcement is ensured, and finally this report serves as the policy hub for the whole licensing piece. On the rightmost, you have our runtime, which can work immaterial of devices. It can work on mobile devices. It can work on server-based. It can work on desktop applications. You can use the runtime both. We give APIs. We have like six to eight APIs, and we give you an SDK to run to integrate with these runtime environments, or you can connect through web services. The beauty of this architecture is it serves as a global licensing manager. It's scalable. If you have spikes in your customer users, because it's cloud and because our load balancer is ahead of our server, we can elastically scale horizontally or vertically based on the demand. The fact that the way the licensing is done is on time slice basis, you can detach the license, you can move licenses between devices, and brings a host of benefits. And of course, we are happy to deep dive into each of this in follow-up conversation. Finally, the usage collection piece makes it extremely powerful in terms of what you can do with this usage information that comes in a real-time mode. Let's talk maybe for the next couple of minutes some of the use cases that we have addressed, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. So let's start with the first one, a pure cloud, or what we call as a SaaS application. What this company does is they help companies like Netflix, YouTube move large chunks of data, and these are in fact some of our customers, right? So they move large chunks of data for them really quick. And the way they charge their customers in turn is they measure how much data is being transferred on each packet, and then they aggregate this over a monthly time period, and then run an invoice for them, and in a post-paid manner they charge their customers. So it comes back to the whole consumption-based business model that we spoke about. The second piece is this is a customer which sort of has a hybrid model. They sell it's a financial software and services company. they sell very resource-intensive software, and typically it takes days to run a report of it. It could be like your end of quarter books, or it could be your end of year reconciliation of your financial statements and so on. What they very interestingly offer is they offer additional computing power, which is most people call a burst to the cloud. And instead of taking a few hours or few days to run the report, you can run the report in probably 30 minutes, 40 minutes. They charge on a perpetual or one-time license fee for their application. They use Sentinel Cloud to track the additional computing usage as a result of the burst to cloud. And at the end of the month, they just charge their customers for the consumption base. So this is like one of the hybrid models we talked about, where it's like a perpetual plus consumption hybrid. And the third very interesting piece is over the last few months, maybe a year and a half or so, I'm seeing definitely an increased adoption of device-based companies going with the software licensing and consumption-based business model to the market. And this for two reasons. They realize that a lot of innovation is taking place on the software layer, and two, they want to address new markets where they can enable new business models much faster at the software layer than at the hardware layer. So what this medical device company does, very interestingly, is their devices each are like a multi-million-dollar piece of medical equipment, and they've saturated their core market of super specialty hospitals. They now want to go into tier 2 hospitals and clinics. What they do is they lease out their device for $100,000 a year. Then for every X-ray, every MRI scan, for every image that the device takes, they bill the hospital on a monthly basis. And this is like going back to our subscription plus consumption-based pricing model. This has really enabled them to go to new markets in terms of addressing price-sensitive markets, because now hospitals in turn can afford the few $100,000 yearly leasing fee. They're able to very easily pass on the cost of the scans and the MRI to the patients, and in turn to the insurance company and so on. So all in all, everybody in the ecosystem is very happy with the way the new model has worked. And this company is predicting about a 30% increase in revenue as a result of this additional business model that they have gone to market with. So very powerful stories in terms of what you can do with leveraging cloud technologies to drive new business models and capture that incremental revenue. Kind of brings me to the end of what I wanted to talk to you about. And once again, I thank you for being patient and listening to what we had to offer. Dominic, over to you in terms of what are the questions, if any, that have come up.
Okay, thanks, Omkar. I'll give you a second to gather your thoughts and catch your breath. So I've got one question that came in as you were talking, which is to do with how existing ISVs are kind of taking steps to move to this kind of consumption-based approach. So I'm just trying to sort of interpret the question, but so. What sort of steps do we see kind of traditional software vendors taking to move from a technology point of view? Is it a relatively simple process for them?
So I think that's an excellent question, and I get asked that in every of my customer meetings, right? And a lot of it is very closely tied to their customer or managing their customer expectations. So typically, when a customer is used to paying a one-time fee or a subscription fee, and suddenly a consumption-based pricing is introduced, they can sort of be taken aback or not be ready for it. So what I advise my customers is always do it in a piecemeal manner. Take a product stack or a market segment, introduce consumption-based pricing. understand what are the key attributes that are relevant to your industry or to your software. It could be you could be counting the data, you could be counting the computing, you could count the network bandwidth, you could count the number of times a feature was used, number of times a print command was fired. Once you understand the key attributes that that consumption-based models can support, roll it out to a segment of customers. First, talk to them about it. Set the expectation that this is the way they are going to engage with the customer, the way they're going to be invoiced is going to be different. And then as you start seeing adoption among the customer base, start spreading it across other segments and other parts of the product portfolio.
Okay, excellent. Sorry, go on.
And from a technology perspective, just to add the technology piece, what the infrastructure they need would be, they would need a solution that is able to accurately track the application usage. And in this context, Sentinel Cloud can do that. Ideally, initially, they could do with a simple rating table or an invoicing mechanism, but as they start scaling, they probably need to go to a full-fledged billing system. And then sort of once that kind of starts maturing, then they can look at other marketing techniques to understand based on consumption, you send promotions to your customer base. So that's how they need to scale up.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. I think that's it. I don't think there are any other questions at this stage. So if that is the only question we're going to get, we'll leave it at that. So firstly, thank you very much for attending and for listening this afternoon. If you have got any questions, you can always email me. I think all of the emails have come out with my details on there, and if there are specific questions from Car, I can forward them to him. Let me just check. I've got a question. So I've got a question about, will the video be available? Yes, it will. What I will need to do is we'll be publishing this on our website, which may take a day or two just to get it published, and then we can share a link for everybody so that you can access it. So I'll make sure that's done, and you can see it afterwards, basically, and I'll give you a link that allows you to view it without having to register for the details again. So yes, we'll make that available, but just please be patient just for a couple of days while we post that to our website. Okay, well, with that, we'll leave it there. So thanks very much, Omkar, and thank you very much for attending, and have a good rest of the day or evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dominic. Thank you, everybody, for attending.